Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SB Reviews where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Millie Sievert and the Radioactive 5 titled Blindsided. And if we switch over to here we have ourselves a track on the screen on YouTube and it's from an act named Innuminous and Archimedes, who I've listened to music from them before. I think this is a new project of theirs if I'm not mistaken. And we're going to listen through this track from start to finish. We're going to hear what we think. Let's go. Keys.
Domino fur flying in his nightfall, a cat's prowling serpents across the banister.
Is this like, because I know that Innuminous, and I know that there's been a bit of AI music and stuff like that, or like there's AI involved in the video at least.
Down the stairs.
Is the AI?
Into a false midnight's wake dawn. Kitten scamper from startled searching nap time light. This rose's hell window ward to dawn's blackest void. No mourners and blank faces, to shrouds no eulogies.
It got really dark with the no shrouds, no eulogies bit. And it's kind of gotten to this point where we have kind of fluttering strings with discordant, like diminished triads or something like that, with like kind of wispy, noisy synths. Like reverse takes, and it's highly unsettling.
No rhythmic grief ways, no doubt our windy selves, blinded earth's evasive eye. Whirling nations of dust can hold no congress, can wage no war, will spin in space without hate. They vanish.
Hang on, sorry, I accidentally pressed a button then. I didn't mean for that
They vanish
to happen.
into nothingness like a fast pool ball. Down a corner pocket, under watching snake eyes.
So I'm going to level with you. I had to listen through the verse first verse again just to see if I could figure things out. This one's kind of lost me a little bit. I'm going to talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an actor named Millie Sievert and the Radioactive 5 titled Blindsided. Now, this track, I'm not sure what it was about. It went from talking about cats and kittens and serpents, all the way to talking about dust and space and swirling around and there's no Congress. And then I suppose being sort of watched by snake eyes, so maybe the cats were blindsided by the snake or something like that. Maybe that was it. Like they were prowling around and then they on banisters and then they got caught out and then there was like a figurative thing related to like the philosophy and stuff situated in the second verse. This is one of the most avant-garde, trippy, psychedelic tracks I've listened to in my life, and I don't mean that in like a negative way necessarily. It's just a situation where if I take the story at face value, I kind of have to. The vocals, I reckon they're AI vocals, and I think that that's cool because it shows just how far the computers are getting to a point where they can figure out how a person sounds. Like, there were parts where the AI thought it needed to have more oomph in some notes, where it kind of needed to hold certain ones. It was starting to sound human. Not completely. Not in the way that was convincing. Some of the cuts were a little bit too short. They seemed like, no, like they'd stop bluntly, which wouldn't necessarily reflect how like a human singer would sing. This could have also been a human singer, and I'm just being really harsh, but I think that they did well considering. I'm happy with it. I thought that, the note choices they had harmonized well with whatever backing they had behind them. And, it was good. I don't even know how to talk about AI vocals in a way where, because is it really a thing about vocal technique? If it's a computer singing and they can just hit that naturally, I suppose you just talk about whether or not the melodies and stuff worked. And I thought they did. It had a kind of poppy aesthetic to it, like a pop singer aesthetic to it and vibe. So I suppose that was good too. I don't know if I got a sense of emotionality from it or expressiveness, but I think it was trying to do that, and I can commend that. I think once AI figures out how to sound like what it's trying to talk about and how it manages to quote-unquote invoke feeling with its performances, that's going to be when stuff gets really wild and difficult. And I think it's a really positive thing for the music industry that we're not there yet, because that would literally cripple it. Like if AI got to a point where the vocals could sound like real humans and you couldn't tell, it would cripple it. There would be no more music industry. It would be so difficult. The track at 4 minutes, I thought it was reasonably well structured. I mean, there were several verse sections. There were drums, there were bass, there were synths, there were like these kind of noisy elements there where like there was a bit of like a rumination and uncertainty with the reflected backwards takes. I thought that I'm not sure whether we were like manually inputting those beats or we were getting the computer to figure out how to implement them in its own way, but either way I thought that sometimes they worked. Other times it just seemed like there was like a blunt tempo shift, or there was just a transition to a genre that seemed like it was almost like we were passing by a nightclub driving home or something, and we could hear the music from that and it kind of petered out. I thought the use of the kind of like the bass and the interesting synth tones and the drums suited the vocal style. I wasn't sure about the middle part where we had those kind of trippy sounding reverse takes on a synth that were more sort of noisy and kind of grainy sounding. I don't know if that necessarily helped the experience, but I suppose it also kind of sounded like dust. And when we're talking about like the dust swirling and stuff like that, like a storm, I suppose that's totally fine. So I suppose if we're looking for literal expressiveness, the computer trying to figure out how to make sounds that reflect the vocals there instrumentally, that kind of makes sense. I think it's kind of clever. I think a lack of commitment to a specific tempo or chord progression, like there was this one note throughout, there was like a or something like that the whole entire time, like a unifying note or something like that. Maybe that was what's trying to guide the rest of the elements within it. Maybe that was just simply part of like the process they were using to make the track. I'm not sure. But that, I suppose, provided a note for the vocals to harmonize on. So in that respect, I figured there wasn't necessarily a key change. And I think if you were... Like, this would be like an avant-garde experimental through composed piece if it was done like fully as part of it, like a human performance. I'm not trying to be like, I suppose, recidivist about it, or like reductionist about it. It's cool that we're messing around with this kind of stuff. I think it's great to experiment with the possibilities. I just don't know if it was necessarily an enjoyable experience for me as a music listener to check this out, because while it was fascinating, I don't know if I appreciate... Like, it would have been good if they could, like, have an established theme and, like, grow on that, I suppose. I think the kind of the randomness of some of the different sections, how they went in and out of each other, it would have been nice if we'd had a bit more... And this is difficult, I know, to develop, but, like, the context of knowing when to switch a section, that's something that'll probably take time. Like, I get that we knew to kind of keep a theme until the vocals ended, but it's like we just bluntly stopped. And usually you have a bit of a smoother transition going into the next section, if that makes sense. So I think that the music was trying to sound like the vocals. So, the poppy sort of like tones of the singer and the verses, we had the synth, bass, and drums. When there was nothing, it was the noisy kind of sandy bits. We had some EDM-ish stuff later on as well, which was kind of psychedelic sounding. It was a bit faster and had a doof, doof, doof kind of thing going on. That was kind of cool by itself. That was definitely a surreal kind of like opportunity. And I appreciate it. I probably sound like I'm being a bit harsh. I'm not. I'm just kind of being transparent about my feelings on it. I don't think there was anything musically wrong with it, in the sense that there were no bad notes performed. It's like the computer just hasn't really figured out how to make a track like a lot of music sounds, but it's getting closer. And that's both a kind of cool thing and also really terrifying. For the studio recording, mixing, and mastering, I think that's really... I mean, it's good for what it is. I can't tell how they made it, but the leveling itself is fine. Like, one element wasn't too loud over the other. I assume whatever's making the music kind of knows how things are supposed to be, because it can like literally sense the amount of energy coming from that, and it automatically like puts it down or up in the mix depending. The music surrounded you in the headphones. Things were nicely niched in a frequency spectrum. I mean, like, there were some resonant frequencies, but I think it was just because we were trying to figure out which sounds needed to go where. It was nice and loud without pumping. I think that there's a lot of potential for this, but I'm also kind of scared about it. Like, I know that there are already record labels which are very interested. Like, they're already trying to develop AI artists because they don't want to have to rely on human musicians. And if you think about that, if labels have AI musicians that can just do all the work of a human, why would they need human musicians? Granted, to do gigs, but you can get holograms. There'll be a point, I think, where like you can have half of the live gigs done by holograms and half of the gigs done by humans, and the holograms will be more reliable, probably far cheaper, and the labels keep all the profits. So I suppose, if anything, I listen to this and I think overall it's a really fascinating piece of music, and I'm glad that Millie Sievert and the Radioactive 5 Enormous, I'm glad they're experimenting. I've probably talked about it too much or gone over it the pudding, but this is my review anyways of this track from an act named Millie Sievert and the Radioactive 5 titled Blindsided. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go check out their various social medias and their YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe. Please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with the crazy stuff going on in the world. And just in case, because I feel like I've cut this track short, I guess it's difficult to review as a closing note, a little bit of extra stuff, because you're trying to review it from the perspective of what you have to avoid what it could be. You have to see it as what it is. And at the moment, it's kind of like a toddler getting pieces and trying to make a puzzle out of them, even if they don't necessarily fit. That's not a comment on the person who, like, it's not a comment on Enuminous or Blindsided. It's like, if this is the computer trying to figure out how to put stuff together, if that is the case, I think that's what's going on, is it's like a toddler trying to put pieces to puzzle. If we're just going for an experimental thing, that's fine. And if we've deliberately told it to do things like this, it's fine. Just covering my butt there, you know. As I understand that it's okay to do things differently than the normal, and I'm not being like an elitist or anything like that, but yeah. See you later. Spiderhands out.